This is the Bush Whisperer coming at you from Boulder's Penguin Sanctuary, Simonstown, Cape Town, southern tip of Africa. Come to talk to you today about diet, something that's quite fundamental and important, and it's something that we often overlook. And there are numerous factors to take into consideration when one considers one's diet. The first and most obvious one is water. How much water does one drink? Very, very important. Water is information. Water brings the connection between all the cells. It detoxifies all the cells. And it also is the substance that can imprint consciousness upon it. So the water we drink and what imprints energetically the water holds is also quite important to how it's going to affect your consciousness. There have been various experiments that have turned mainstream of late regarding water and how water can be programmed and how the ice crystals of water can actually reflect this programming in a very direct way. It's quite visually obvious to notice. So obviously water is the key to detoxifying the system, to keeping the system well regulated, balanced, to the metabolism as well. You know, people often gain weight when they're not drinking enough water. It's one of those simple things that people forget. Another thing to consider is hormones. Hormones are essentially synthesized from proteins. So our body takes in various different types of proteins, and there are many types of proteins. And our body breaks them down, breaks down the fats, and turns them into various different other components. Though the body likes to take shortcuts. If you give it X, Y, it will try and turn it into X or Y, and then build XYZ out of those components. So the types of proteins that we take in are going to have an effect on the type of hormones that we generate in our body. And another thing to consider is when one is eating certain foods, one can actually take hormones in through the foods. So now we're going to look at this vegetarianism and the veganism. Veganism is probably the most superior of all the diets. However, veganism has become a religion of late, and in as much it's psychologically unhealthy. Eating a plant-based diet, on the other hand, is very, very healthy. It's basically being vegan without being vegan. Because you'll notice that vegans want to turn the whole world into vegans. And they're quite aggressive. They tend to be quite nasty and have a lot of attitude problems very often. And I'm not speaking about all the vegans, by the way. I'm just speaking about those that you will see that are predominantly operating on social networks and sharing their content in such a way as to be aggressive towards non-vegans. That's not particularly healthy. However, eating a plant-based diet is the way that your body's going to perform the best. This is why you'll find that Olympic athletes are eating a plant-based diet. And it gives you a better muscular system, believe it or not. Because when you're eating dairy or meats, it produces certain kinds of acidic effects within the body that actually cause lactic acid to be produced faster. And so one can't train as hard, one's body has less energy, one's muscles get tired faster, it takes longer to recover for the body when these acids are in the body. So there are a lot of reasons why one wouldn't eat dairy products or meats or any such foods. However, I'm not going to say to everybody that you have to become vegan or that you need to eat a plant-based diet, because I've been a vegetarian and I'm not even a total vegan, although I don't eat very much dairy at all. I might have a little bit of yogurt sometimes, though mostly I tend to eat nuts. I try and avoid non-vegan products. Tiny bit of milk once in a while in maybe a cup of tea or something, though even that's starting to get on my nerves. So I am returning to a plant-based diet. I started eating lassi when I was in India because obviously as you go to India you'll find that there are a lot of bacteria and all sorts of bugs in India, and having a lassi actually helps protect your gut, protect your immune system so you don't get sick. However, what I will say with regards to eating is that many of the foods that we eat are badly farmed. And they've got terrible toxicity levels in the actual foods themselves, especially those that are farming animals, livestock, such. Though it is important to understand that farming in modern day civilization has become a financial thing. So people farm in order to make money. And if giving an animal hormones is going to cause it to produce more milk, or giving an animal hormones in the feed is going to cause it to lay more eggs, or giving an animal certain hormones is going to cause it to produce more mass, so there's more meat on the shelf. This is what farmers tend to do. That's the reality. So a lot of the non-plant-based foods are laced with hormones, and that's highly toxic for the body to be taking in all these unnatural hormones. Even eating meats is going to produce a lot of hormones in the body, and it's going to have an effect on one's emotional nature. Understand and accept this as part of life. It's a fact. You will change your hormones. You will have an effect on your emotional body if you eat meat or dairy products. Though if one eats a little bit and within balance, one should be able to regulate this process. The key is, if you do eat these, to be very careful and be sure that the food that you're eating has been carefully resourced, carefully farmed, carefully produced. And the same can be said for vegetables. We've got so much toxicity on the vegetables. It's not just that the animals are being laced with hormones. The feed that they're being given has been sprayed with all sorts of insecticides and other kinds of toxins. And the vegetables that we eat are also sprayed with insecticides. The bread that you eat has been sprayed with insecticides, the wheat, before it's been turned into flour. And the vegetables are also genetically modified these days. You have something called BT farming, where they take the genetics of an animal and mix it with the genetics of a plant. Many potatoes are BT potatoes on Earth these days, because when they take jellyfish genes and put them into potatoes, they can grow them with less water, so it's economically more viable. See, water is an expense. So when you start to consider all of these factors, you start realizing it's not just a question of eating a plant-based diet. It's a lot more complicated than that. One has to become conscious of the actual food one's eating on a very broad scale, and the preservatives in the food that are then placed into the food. And if the food's been processed, you've got extra worries, more things to consider. The fats get changed during the process of processing, and conditioners are used, and preservatives and flavor enhancers, and all of these toxins build up in the body. And they affect how efficient the emotional system works, because they affect the hormonal system in the body. They also affect how well the mind works, how well the thinking process operates, because they affect the neurological systems. The different kinds of salts that you eat are really fundamentally important. If you're eating too much of the sodium-based salt that everybody eats, the iodized salt that you buy on the shelf, that's highly toxic. I personally go for the Himalayan Kala Namak, the black salt, which is used in Ayurveda. And that's got a compound of various different types of salts. I think it's got at least 10 of the tissue salts that you need for your body. And there are 12 essential tissue salts that you need. Some of these tissue salts, many of them you can find in vegetables, root vegetables especially. Various different kinds of fruits will even hold these salts. Papaya, for example, lychees, watermelon, various different kinds of fruits, coconuts hold different kinds of salts. That's why these are used in electrolytes to replace salts if people are suffering from dehydration. And obviously having the correct salts means that the water that you drink is taken up on a cellular level and is able to permeate and move through all the cells. So if you're not eating the correct salts and drinking the correct water, you're going to have a problem with your system not being able to be getting cleaned properly, and there'll be a build-up of toxicity. And if one's then eating too many preservatives, that's going to be stuck in the body. And if there's too much hormones, that's going to affect the hormonal system, because it won't be getting cleaned as efficiently. And that's got to do with eating meats and eggs and various different kinds of foods. So yeah, having been a vegetarian for most of my life, my whole adult life, when I was first a vegetarian, I thought everybody had to become a vegetarian. That was it. Then I turned vegan and I was like, everybody has to be vegan. But when you've been doing this for like a few centuries, you tend to lighten up and relax a little bit. I would suggest to all of you, go and take a good look at yourself. Look at your teeth. Study your teeth very, very carefully. You're going to find a clue about what you need to eat by studying your teeth, because nature has an intelligent design. The shaman understands the intelligent design of nature and always comes back to nature for guidance. For nature is the guru. Nature is the teacher. And when one observes nature, one can observe the nature of one's body. One can observe the nature of one's consciousness. And in observation of the nature of the body, one gets great revelations about what one should eat. What is the correct diet for one's body will be presented by the teeth that one has been born with. For one has been born with teeth based on the genetic profile that one's body is constructed upon. And that genetic profile would have dictated what type of teeth you have. And the type of teeth you have would be relevant and relative to the blood type that you have. And so the blood type that you have, based on the teeth that you have, would require certain kinds of nutrients over other kinds of nutrients in a greater or lesser degree. One thing that feeds one person can become a poison or a toxin to another. Some people are allergic to nuts. Other people perform really well when they eat nuts. The same can be said for tomatoes. Some people are allergic to dairy products. Probably a good reason for that, especially in this modern day and age, the way dairy is produced. One has to be careful for dairy. One can't be a vegetarian and say, oh, I'm fine, I'm a vegetarian, because there was research done by the sports industry and the Olympic athletes specifically, because they've got a lot of science that actually govern the Olympic training. And they discovered that eating a vegetarian diet only gives you 25% of the benefits. When you eat a plant-based diet, you get 100% of the benefits, and it literally reduces your heart disease profiling factor by about 50%, which is incredible. And not only that, I mean, the power lifter, the guy who had been the strongest man in the world for many years, he only turned to a plant-based diet when he was in his 40s. And in his late 40s, he had broken all the records he created in powerlifting in his 20s and in his 30s. That's incredible. His training went to 2.0, and he became a classic example of the fact that you don't need to eat anything other than a plant-based diet to be incredibly physically strong. In fact, your physical strength increases when you don't eat meat, which is antithetical to what we were taught as children. We were taught that we need to eat meat in order to be physically strong. And I can tell you now, as somebody that hasn't eaten meat his whole life, I've always been incredibly physically strong, way stronger than meat eaters, with much more endurance, with a greater ability to take physical punishment in my physical body, and a far quicker recovery rate on a muscular level than others. Bless you, my boy. So it's important to realize that there's been a lot of propaganda and there's been a lot of lies into what we need to eat. And unfortunately, a lot of people have been brainwashed since being little children. So it's very difficult to snap out of that. Though that being said, study your teeth. Get an innate, deep understanding and awareness of what your body requires and eat accordingly. If you do have pronounced canines, some people do, you should probably eat some kind of flesh. It's just how it is. Though, if you do need to eat flesh, doesn't mean you need to eat steaks every day, because that's actually going to cause heart problems. It's going to make you sick. It's going to deteriorate your physical health. That just means that you should have a regular intake of some kind of flesh, and probably a small 100 gram, 50 gram piece of meat, 50 to 100 grams for an adult man, twice a week would be sufficient. And you could eat one piece of meat and one piece of fish in a week. And then you'd have to be very careful about where you source that meat. Another thing I'm going to warn you against is soya. Stay away from soy milk. Stay away from soy products. Stay away from eating soya. 90% of all the world's soya is GMO. And it's the xenoestrogen count in soya is highly, highly toxic. Rather eat lentils. Lentils and pulses are really, really good for you. They give amazing amino acid profile and wonderful health benefits. However, soya is probably one of the most toxic things that you can eat, especially for a woman. It causes breast cancer, causes problems with the uterus. With men, it causes a low testosterone count. You won't be able to get it up, perform for the ladies. It's a total mess. So, yeah, you are what you eat. It will affect the resonant frequencies of your nervous system. It will affect your hormonal system. how productive it is, how well it works. It will affect the movement of water through the cells and the level of hydration on a deep cellular level. And this is obviously going to have huge effects on your health in so many ways, and not just your health, your consciousness field is manifesting through the body. So there's a relative balance here to be understood, and we need to seek the harmony of this balance. So what water you drink and what salts you have in your body is actually fundamental to the whole process of being healthy and uptaking nutrition, and being able to get the nutrition to all parts of the cells in the body as well, for water is the carrier. And then, of course, how you breathe. Breathing is also fundamentally important. So I'm going to leave you with those few thoughts with regards to diet, health, being in the body, having a good mental and emotional state within the physical body. What we eat is going to affect that. Stay away from processed food, and if you can, grow food yourself. That is the most productive way that you're going to actually produce food. Because that way you get to see the food, you get to be a part of the life cycle. And on an energetic consciousness level, you get to be a part of the consciousness field that is producing that food, which is fundamentally important. This is the Bush Whisperer coming at the most beautiful place in the world, sharing the beauty and sharing a bit of insight about diet. Hope you have an absolutely gorgeous day. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.